Before you watch this video, please subscribe. It had been a grueling day at work, and all I wanted was to get home and unwind. I hailed an Uber, and a driver named Mark accepted the request. When his car pulled up, I climbed into the back seat, ready for a quiet ride home. Mark seemed friendly enough when he greeted me with a curt nod and a polite hello. But as we began our journey, I couldn't help but notice how unusually quiet he was. I attempted to strike up a conversation to pass the time, asking about the weather and local news. But Mark's responses were short and disinterested. We were cruising down the familiar route towards my neighborhood when my heart began to pound in my chest. Mark suddenly turned off the well-lit main road onto a narrow, winding path that looked nothing like the way to my house. Anxiety crept over me, and I couldn't help but voice my concerns. Excuse me, Mark. This isn't the way to my place, I said, my voice quivering. Mark didn't respond, his eyes fixed intently on the dark road ahead. Panic welled up inside me, and I considered jumping out of the moving vehicle. But the remote location we were in made that option seem even scarier. Just as I was contemplating my next move, Mark finally broke his eerie silence. He turned to me, and his face was contorted into a sinister smile that sent shivers down my spine. In a low, menacing whisper, he uttered words that still haunt my nightmares. "You're going to a place where no one can hear you scream." Terror gripped me as I realized the direness of my situation. I screamed for help at the top of my lungs, pounding on the windows and kicking the seats. Miraculously, a passing car heard my cries and screeched to a halt. Mark, startled by the commotion, hit the gas and sped away, leaving me trembling and traumatized by the encounter. I immediately reported the incident to the police, and they launched an investigation into the mysterious driver named Mark. To this day, I can't shake off the feeling that I narrowly escaped a horrifying fate, and I'm always cautious when taking an Uber ride. It was a gloomy, rain-soaked evening when I accepted an Uber ride request from a remote part of town. As I arrived at the pickup location, there was no one in sight. The app indicated that the passenger was nearby, so I called out, "Hello, is anyone here for an Uber?" A hauntingly faint, eerie voice replied from the shadows. "Over here." I strained my eyes to see through the pouring rain and dim streetlight to find a pale, drenched woman standing there. She appeared to be in her 30s, with long, wet hair obscuring most of her face. Without saying a word, she got into my car and took a seat in the back, her eyes fixed straight ahead. The unsettling atmosphere in the car was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I tried to break the eerie silence by asking, "Can you please confirm your destination?" She continued to stare ahead, not acknowledging my question. Her face remained expressionless, and her clothes were soaked, with water pooling on the floor of my car. As I drove, I nervously glanced at her through the rearview mirror, but she hadn't moved a muscle. The minutes passed like hours, and a growing unease settled over me. The rain intensified, creating a drumming soundtrack to the surreal experience. My voice trembled as I tried to engage her in conversation again, asking, "Is everything all right? Do you need anything? Still?" She didn't respond, her gaze unwavering. We reached what I believed to be her drop-off point, a quiet and desolate street corner. I brought the car to a stop, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned around to see if she was ready to exit, but to my horror, she had vanished. The back seat was empty, and the passenger side door remained closed. Terrified and bewildered, I stepped out of the car, scanning the area in disbelief. There was no sign of her. She had disappeared without a trace, leaving only wet footprints on the car's floor as evidence of her presence. Shaken to my core, I called out for her, but my voice echoed in the empty street. It was as though she had never existed, and the eerie encounter haunted me long after that rainy night, leaving me with more questions than answers about the mysterious passenger who seemed to vanish into thin air. One night, after a grueling day at work, I decided to call an Uber to get home. The driver, Sarah, accepted my request, and I settled into the back seat, ready for a relaxing ride. I provided her with my destination, and we set off into the darkness. As we drove through the familiar streets, everything seemed perfectly normal. However, as we approached a particular intersection, Sarah's GPS started acting strangely. It began recalculating the route repeatedly, as if it couldn't quite figure out where we were. I frowned, glancing at Sarah, who appeared equally puzzled. Feeling a bit uneasy, I asked, "Is everything okay with the GPS?" Sarah kept her eyes on the road, but nodded. "It's just a glitch, I think. Happens sometimes." I reluctantly accepted her explanation and tried to relax. However, the GPS continued its erratic behavior, leading us deeper into unfamiliar territory. I noticed that the surroundings were growing increasingly eerie. Dimly lit streets, abandoned buildings, and an oppressive silence that seemed to envelop us. My anxiety grew with every turn, and I couldn't help but question our route. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sarah didn't respond immediately, her grip on the steering wheel tightening. Finally, she said, "I'm not sure what's happening. I'll try to get us back on track." But no matter what she did, the GPS seemed determined to take us on a detour through this strange and unsettling part of the city. It was as if the roads were shifting and rearranging themselves. My fear escalated, and I contemplated asking her to stop and let me out. But the desolate location made that option feel too risky. I watched as the buildings outside my window became increasingly decrepit, the streetlights flickering ominously. Just when I thought we were truly lost, the GPS suddenly snapped back to reality. We were back on a familiar road, close to my neighborhood. Sarah looked as relieved as I felt, and we continued the ride in silence. I was grateful to finally reach my destination, and I hastily exited the car. But as I turned to thank Sarah and pay for the ride, she wore an expression of unease and fear. "I don't know what happened back there," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I've never experienced anything like that before." I assured her that it was probably just a technical glitch. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inexplicable had occurred during that bizarre detour through a part of the city that didn't seem to belong to our world. As I entered my home, I couldn't help but wonder if I had narrowly escaped something far more sinister than a mere GPS malfunction.